So let's start the first question. Patient with hepatic cirrhosis. Patient with hepatic cirrhosis and ascites. Okay, so this is cirrhotic edema. What is the diagnosis here will be cirrhotic edema. Just remember this. Ascites with cirrhosis. What is the diuretic of choice? Options are furosemide, thiazide, triamterene, and eplerenone. We all know furosemide is loop diuretic. Thiazide is a thiazide diuretic. Both these triamterene and eplerenone are potassium sparing diuretics. Now, how to identify which is the drug of choice? So let's go to this slide. So see, furosemide is a loop diuretic. Indication is pulmonary edema because it causes vasodilation in the pulmonary vasculature. So pulmonary edema. Thiazide diuretic. Indication is hypertension. First line agent for hypertension. Also heart failure. So first two options are ruled out here. Furosemide and thiazide, it's not the option. So the C and D, either one is the option. Both are potassium sparing diuretics. There are two types of potassium sparing diuretics. One that inhibits the, see, these potassium sparing diuretics acts in your late distal tubule and collecting duct. Simple. Remember that first. In the late distal tubule and collecting duct, in the collecting duct, there is something that is called cell called principal cell. This principal cell, in the luminal side, it has a transporter that is called as ENaC. In the luminal side, it has a transporter that is called as ENaC, which is useful in transport of sodium and potassium. So how does that do? It helps in reabsorption of your sodium and it pushes the potassium out into the lumen. So what does this amiloride and triamterene, two drugs, amiloride and triamterene, it blocks the ENaC channels. It blocks this ENaC channel. So what happens? Sodium is not getting reabsorbed. So it acts as a diuretic. The potassium is not going out. So it is sparing the potassium. So it is a potassium sparing diuretic. Similarly, coming to the interstitial side, we have an ATP channel which helps in transportation of sodium and potassium. So what is the role of this ATP channel? It is under the control of aldosterone. So what does aldosterone do? We all know that. Aldosterone conserves sodium, pushes potassium. That's the role of aldosterone. So if you give an aldosterone antagonist, that is mineralocorticoid receptor antagonist, spironolactone and eplerenone, two drugs, it helps in pushing your sodium out, diuretic effect, and helps in decreasing the secretion of potassium. So potassium sparing diuretic. So these are the two potassium sparing diuretic groups, ENaC inhibitors and mineralocorticoid receptor antagonists. It is also been said that the drugs pentamidine and triamthoprim also has this potassium sparing effect. Whenever some question is asked with respect to cotrimoxazole was given and hyperkalemia was noted, something like that, side effect is hyperkalemia. So potassium sparing effect can be seen with that as well. Now coming to ENaC inhibitors, amiloride is more potent and longer acting when compared to triamterene. Remember, simple. Amiloride is A, first one. Amiloride is more potent and long acting. This triamterene has a weak folic acid antagonist. So that's why you don't give it in cirrhotic patients because it can cause megaloblastic anemia. So our question, they are asking triamterene. So it cannot be given in cirrhotic patient because it can cause megaloblastic anemia. So that option is also ruled out. So we are left with spironolactone. So answer for this question is eplerenone or spironolactone. Now coming back to the discussion, this amiloride is also the drug of choice for lithium-induced diabetes insipidus because lithium is absorbed via these ENaC channels. Lithium mimics sodium, so it is getting absorbed. So this is used to treat lithium-induced diabetes insipidus. This amiloride is also used as an aerosol to reduce secretions in cystic fibrosis. It is used as an aerosol to decrease the secretions in cystic fibrosis. Another property of amiloride is it reduces magnesium, it reduces calcium in the body. But that means it reduces the calcium and magnesium excretion, whereas it increases the urate excretion. Remember this. Now coming to aldosterone, MR antagonist, spironolactone, candrenone is a metabolite of spironolactone, potassium candrenate and eplerenone. So two important drugs is spironolactone and eplerenone. Other than that, you have candrenone and potassium candrenate. Candrenone is an active metabolite of spironolactone. Okay. Exact opposite of amiloride. It decreases calcium excretion. Whereas amiloride, spironolactone increases calcium excretion, whereas amiloride decreases calcium excretion. Remember this. One important feature about this aldosterone, repeatedly asked question, act from the interstitial side. Act from the interstitial side. Where all other diuretics acts from the luminal side. So remember this. Okay. More effect is seen when aldosterone levels are high in hepatic cirrhosis, nephrotic syndrome, congestive cardiac failure. The aldosterone levels are high. So in that case, it becomes very useful. Okay. So this is the drug of choice for cirrhotic edema. This is the drug of choice for cirrhotic edema. Where else you can use this? Nephrotic syndrome, chronic heart failure. It can also be used with loops and thiazides for potassium sparing effect in hypertension. It is also used in the treatment of hirsutism. Why? Because this resembles testosterone. So it can go and bind to the testosterone receptor, but it's a competitive antagonist at the testosterone receptor. It is ineffective in Addison's disease because aldosterone levels are very low in Addison, so it will not be effective. Side effects, we all know, gynecomastia, impotence, hyperkalemia because of potassium sparing effect. So do not give it with AC inhibitors. Be careful, monitor. AC inhibitors with spironolactone can cause more potassium increase. It can cause even peptic ulcers. One side effect of eplerenone is GI side effects. GI side effects. Done. I have covered the entire group of potassium sparing diuretics for you. So the answer for this question will be furosemide cannot be given, thiazide cannot be given, triamterene cannot be given because it causes megaloblasticity and cirrhosis, but the drug of choice for direct question from Goodman-Gilman. Eplerenone is drug of choice for cirrhotic edema, spironolactone or eplerenone. Okay. Now moving to second question. Dopamine at which dose act at beta receptors? Greater than 10, less than 2, greater than 20, 2 to 10. So this was the options given. It's very simple question. Direct question from book Goodman-Gilman. Dopamine is a sympathomimetic. It's a drug of choice for, remember this, cardiogenic shock with oliguric renal failure. They repeatedly ask this question. It's a drug of choice for cardiogenic shock with oliguric renal failure. So dopamine acts at 3 receptors, D1, beta 1 and alpha 1. D1 means it is present in renal vasculature. It causes vasodilation. Beta 1 is present in heart. It causes inotropic, chronotropic, bromotropic, positive. Heart rate, contractility, everything is getting increased. Alpha 1, it causes vasoconstriction. So these 3 mechanisms you already know. D1, beta 1, alpha 1, we have already seen in ANS classes. With respect to dose, first starting dose, that is 1 to 2 micrograms per kg per minute. It acts only in your D receptors. Intermediate dose 2 to 10 acts in your beta receptors. Highest dose greater than 10 acts in your alpha 1 receptors. Okay. So the question here is at which dose beta 1 receptor is acting. So it is the intermediate dose 1 to 2, 2 to 10 greater than 10. So what will be the option here? 2 to 10. If it is less than 2, this will be D1. If it is greater than 10, this will be alpha 1. Greater than 20 also alpha 1. 2 to 10 will be your beta 1 receptors. Very direct, simple question. Now moving to third question. We have already seen this in classes. Organophosphate poisoning is what type of inhibitors? It is a, remember this, it's a competitive type of inhibitor because the ACHC enzyme, that is acetylcholinesterase enzyme, is responsible for metabolism of acetylcholine. But what does this organophosphate does? Anionic site, esteric site. This acetylcholine usually goes and sits in your esteric site and it gets metabolized. But when OPC poisoning happens, this OPC goes and sits in your esteric site competing with the acetylcholine, which normally goes and binds. So this is nothing but a competitive inhibitor, first point. The second point in this is whether it is reversible or irreversible. See, all competitive inhibitors are reversible. Why? Because in competitive inhibition, let's have this. This is your enzyme. This is your substrate. Usually the substrate goes and binds to the site where it has to bind. Correct? But when a competitive inhibitor is given, it goes and binds to the same place where the substrate also goes and binds. But if you, and inhibits the process. But if you want to reverse it, you can increase the dose of the substrate. So that this particular type of inhibition is called surmountable inhibition. But with respect to OPC alone, this cannot be done because OPC is irreversible. Even though enzyme reactivators like auxins can be given to regenerate the acetylcholinesterase enzyme, it is still considered as an irreversible competitive inhibition. So let's just take an example of all these competitive, non-competitive, uncompetitive. What examples they can ask in exams. See, with respect to competitive, there are two types, reversible, irreversible. Physostigmine and neostigmine are reversible examples. OPC is an example for irreversible. It binds only to the enzyme. Binds only to the enzyme. We all know, see, substrate, you keep on increasing the substrate to overcome it. But the Vmax, half maximum velocity, is not going to change in competitive inhibition. So Km keeps on increasing, whereas Vmax will never alter. In case of non-competitive, it binds to both E and ES complex. It's called as allosteric inhibition. Because substrate binds to different site, the inhibitor goes and binds to a different site, but still it inhibits. So there are two types, reversible and irreversible. For reversible, example is cyanide. Irreversible is Ca, carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. Remember these examples. They might ask in next time. Here, whatever happens, the substrate, even if you increase the dose of substrate, the inhibition is not going to be reversed. Okay. Only you have to give an antidote to reverse it. That's why in cyanide you give an antidote to reverse it. You cannot give a drug to reverse it. You cannot go and increase the concentration of substrate to reverse it. And okay, so in this the Km is not going to change. The Km is not going to change. Whereas the Vmax, the reaction stops. So Vmax will keep on decreasing. Vmax will keep on decreasing. Uncompetitive is a very rare type. Both Km and Vmax will decrease. Example is lithium. So competitive, reversible, physostigmine, neostigmine, irreversible, OPC. Non-competitive, reversible, irreversible, cyanide, Ca inhibitors. Uncompetitive, lithium. So here, organophosphate is what type of inhibitor? Uncompetitive. Uncompetitive is wrong. Non-competitive is wrong. There are two options right here, competitive and irreversible. So when these kind of questions comes, these are controversial questions, whether to put it competitive or irreversible. So the better option here among these two will be your irreversible. Will be your irreversible, because in textbooks OPC they say it's a irreversible poisoning. So you can better go for irreversible. But see, this is what, we are not sure whether the same options were given in the exam, because we have recollected this from various people and we have put. So sometimes if competitive is not given, reversible is given, you can directly go for irreversible. But if both competitive and irreversible is given, it is better to choose irreversible. Okay. Weakly acidic drugs bind to. Very simple. Plasma proteins are two types, alpha-1 acid glycoproteins and albumin. Alpha-1 acid means binding of basic drugs. Albumin means binding of acidic drugs. A for A. So AA, this is AB. Okay. So examples of basic drugs, morphine, all INEs, morphine, hyoscine, atropine, amphetamine, and quinine. For binding of acidic drugs, we can remember this TSM book notes. TSM book notes, penicillins. S for sulfonamides. M for methotrexate. B for barbiturates. N for NSAIDs, aspirin and diclo. TSM, preventive and social medicine book notes. So the question asked here is what? Direct question from Goodman-Gilman. Weakly acidic drugs. So acidic means AA. It goes and binds to your albumin. Acidic drugs goes and binds to albumin. So albumin is the right answer. Coming to fifth question. Which of the following drug when given increase the bioavailability of sacubitril? So sacubitril, what is sacubitril? These are all navirs, protease inhibitors. These protease inhibitors have CYP3A4 metabolism. So when you give some other drug that can inhibit this particular enzyme, it can increase the bioavailability of other protease inhibitors. So what is that particular drug? That particular drug is a direct question. It is ritonavir. That's why we give ritonavir boosting regimens. See this. Protease inhibitors. Ritonavir, when given in low dose, it increases the levels of other protease inhibitors. The only protease inhibitors which does not require ritonavir, remember this, which does not require ritonavir is nelfinavir, because it is metabolized by CYP2C19. The other protease inhibitors are metabolized by CYP3A4, whereas nelfinavir does not require ritonavir boosting. It is metabolized by CYP2C19. Atazanavir also doesn't require, but it is required to give ritonavir when it is used with efavirenz or tenofovir. Efavirenz or tenofovir. Okay. One special point about this protease inhibitors, there is a drug called indinavir. It causes renal stones. Remember it. It causes renal stones and crystalluria. Indinavir stones it is called. How does this protease inhibitors act? It inhibit the post-translational modification of viral proteins. Inhibit the post-translational modification of viral proteins, one of the steps in the synthesis of HIV virus in the body. So this can cause asymptomatic hyperbilirubinemia, indinavir. Same way, atazanavir can also cause, two drugs can cause asymptomatic hyperbilirubinemia, indinavir and atazanavir. Remember this, okay? Do not give atazanavir with PPI because it requires acidic pH for action to stay in solution form, or else it will become crystals. Okay, this you have understood now. Now, there are other drugs called amprinavir, fosamprinavir. Fosamprinavir is nothing but a prodrug of amprinavir. It's long-acting. It can cause Stevens-Johnson syndrome. Tipranavir is a new drug. It's a only non-peptide protease inhibitor. Remember this, only non-peptide protease inhibitor. All the protease inhibitor are peptides except for tipranavir, which is a non-peptide protease inhibitor. Okay. It is used with other PIs are resistant. When the other protease inhibitors are resistant, you can use tipranavir because it's a non-peptide. One of the side effects is hepatotoxicity and intracranial hemorrhage. Remember this. They might ask you in next exam. Metabolic abnormalities are known to be caused by this protease inhibitors. Increase in cholesterol, diabetic mellitus, increased lipids, increased insulin resistance, increased fat distribution. So they distribute the fat to your abdomen. So all these clubbed together is called as lipodystrophy syndrome. Lipodystrophy syndrome. Okay. Among this entire group of protease inhibitors, atazanavir is the only PI without metabolic abnormalities. It doesn't cause metabolic abnormalities. Atazanavir. Okay. For this lipodystrophy in HIV patients, Tesmorelin is a drug of choice for treatment. It's a growth hormone analog, synthetic analog. Remember this, Tesmorelin, a growth hormone analog used in the treatment of lipodystrophy syndrome. Okay. One more drug you have to remember this, Cobicistat. Cobicistat. It is not a, it has no anti-HIV properties. It is just a PK booster drug, pharmacokinetic booster drug. Whereas ritonavir itself is a protease inhibitor, but still it boosts the PK. Whereas Cobicistat is just a PK booster. It can be combined with darunavir, atazanavir, and elbitagravir. It can be combined with DAE. D, A, and E, or ADE, whatever you want, you keep. It can be combined with darunavir, atazanavir, and elbitagravir. So integrase inhibitor, elbitagravir is, so it can increase their levels by inhibiting their metabolism. Okay. So this is about your, so which are the following increases the bioavailability of sacubitril/valsartan? Very simple, ritonavir. Ganciclovir is a drug of choice for cytomegalovirus. Vitamin C will be given with iron only. It can increase the absorption of iron. Cimetidine is an enzyme inhibitor. It's an enzyme inhibitor that has nothing to do with your sacubitril/valsartan because it is usually not combined. Only ritonavir is combined. Okay, so this is option for this is C, ritonavir. What is the mechanism of cyclosporin A? See, what is cyclosporin? Tacrolimus and cyclosporin. They are nothing but immunomodulators. They are immunomodulators. Let's see option D first. Dihydroorate dehydrogenase inhibitor. No. The drug is leflunomide. 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 It's a rheumatoid, anti-rheumatic drug. Leflunomide. IMP dehydrogenase inhibitor. Anti-cancer drug. Mycophenolate mofetil. Mycophenolate mofetil. AMP kinase inhibitors. All opioids, many drugs are there. So cyclosporin immunomodulator is never a AMP kinase inhibitor. Calcineurin inhibitor. So this is the only option left. So it is right. Even if you don't know, you can put it. Calcineurin inhibitor. So now let's see what are these calcineurin inhibitors. See, calcineurin is a protein that is required for activation of NF-80 to active form of NF-80. Nothing but NF-80 is nothing but nuclear factor activating T lymphocytes. Okay. So this NF-80 is in inactive form. Calcineurin is required to activate it to active form. When it gets activated, it helps in IL-2 transcription. IL-2 is a pro-inflammatory cytokine. So if IL-2 transcription is increased, IL-2 is produced. If IL-2 is increasingly produced, it goes and binds to your IL-2 receptor. This causes mTOR activation. Then that is the reason for the autoimmunity that is seen with SLE, many conditions. So it alters the immunity. Now, how does this cyclosporin and tacrolimus act? See, cyclosporin C for C, it binds with a protein that is called as cyclophilin. Tacrolimus binds to the protein called as FKBP. When they bind to these proteins, they go and inhibit this calcineurin because calcium is required for activation of calcineurin. So they inhibit the activation of calcineurin. So calcineurin, if it's not activated, the entire step is formed. IL-2 is reduced. Obviously, there is a alteration in the immunity. So the disease is treated. So this cyclosporin binds to cyclophilin, tacrolimus binds to FKBP. This tacrolimus is a macrolide kind of immunomodulator. It's a macrolide group immunomodulator. Okay. One of the main features here is cyclosporin has high amount of toxicity, hirsutism, hyperuricemia, hyperlipidemia, gum hyperplasia. And dose limiting toxicity of cyclosporin is nephrotoxicity. Whereas tacrolimus does not have all these toxicities. The only toxicity that is increasing is hyperglycemia and neurotoxicity. Remember it. Okay. Dose limiting toxicity of cyclosporin is nephro. Tacrolimus, you have only hyperglycemia and neurotoxicity majorly seen. Some other drugs which we have to see here is taclizumab and two monoclonal antibodies, taclizumab and basiliximab. They directly inhibit your IL-2 binding to the IL-2R receptors. So it acts at the IL-2 level. Sirolimus and everolimus, mTOR inhibitor. So after IL-2 gets activated, mTOR is getting activated, right? So it will stop that. It's used in stents usually. So the answer for this question will be calcineurin inhibitor. Now a patient on warfarin developed hemarthrosis. That means he has increased bleeding. Warfarin is a anticoagulant. That means it makes blood thin. Blood thinners. Okay. After cephalosporin administration, what cephalosporin is this? Which cephalosporin can increase bleeding when given with warfarin? That's the question now. Now, there are some cephalosporins that contains N-methyl tetrothiazole group. Remember this last year AIMS, they asked this particular group. What is the group? N-methyl thiotetrazole group is present in some cephalosporins. What are those cephalosporins? Cefamendol, cefoperazone, cefotetan, moxalactam. Cefamendol, cefoperazone, moxalactam and cefotetan. So what does this do? This cause hypothrombemia. Hypothrombemia. They decrease the TT thrombin. Okay. They decrease prothrombin. PT thrombin is prothrombin. Okay. They decrease prothrombin. If prothrombin is decreased, hypothrombemia. Prothrombin is decreased. What will happen? Prothrombin time will increase. If prothrombin time increases, bleeding will increase. What does warfarin do? Warfarin increases your PT, causes bleeding. So when you give this drug along with warfarin already causes bleeding. This cephalosporin will increase that effect, so more bleeding. So patient went in for hemarthrosis. The answer for that is cefoperazone or cefamendol or cefotetan or moxalactam. All these four can also cause disulfiram-like reaction. Remember, okay. Whenever there is a vitamin K deficiency, it can increase warfarin toxicity. I'll tell you why. Factor 2, 7, 9 and 10. It needs to get activated to 2A, 7A, 9A and 10A. Gamma carboxylation is required. For that, the enzyme is gamma carboxylase. So this inactive factors gets gamma carboxylated to active factors with the help of gamma carboxylase. This gamma carboxylase requires vitamin K. The vitamin K hydroxyquinone form is active, whereas epoxide form is inactive. This vitamin K epoxide gets converted to vitamin K by vitamin K epoxide reductase, VCAR enzyme, to vitamin K hydroxyquinone form, which is an active form, and it helps in gamma carboxylation step. This is how vitamin K helps in warfarin's mechanism. I mean, normal mechanism in the body. But when warfarin is given, this inhibits this VCAR enzyme. It inhibits this VCAR enzyme. So what happens? The entire step is gone. S warfarin is more active when compared to R warfarin. So if vitamin K deficiency is present, what will happen? Along when you give warfarin, more bleeding will happen. That's why the antidote of choice for warfarin is vitamin K. When PT-INR is two measurements that can be done when you give warfarin. Bleeding is the most common side effect noted. If an INR is less than 5, you discontinue warfarin and restart at low dose. If INR is 5 to 9, vitamin K should be given 1 mg oral. If greater than 9, 2 to 3 mg oral vitamin K should be given. So this is an antidote actually, vitamin K. Whereas INR greater than or equal to 20, FFP, fresh fluorescent plasma, with these 2, 7, 9 and 10 should be given. Okay. So effect of warfarin increases with cephalosporins. Remember this. With enzyme inhibitors, erythromycin and cimetidine. isoniazid, aspirin. Cephalosporins you remember, aspirin you remember, erythromycin, cimetidine, enzyme inhibitors, isoniazid you remember. Effect of warfarin decreases with enzyme induces. GPCR, I told you, no, GPCR, G protein coupled receptors. Griseofulvin, carbamazepine, rifampicin. OCP also causes decrease in effect of warfarin. So in case of drugs that increase the effect of warfarin, you need to reduce the dose. In case of drugs that reduce the effect of warfarin, you have to increase the dose. Simple logic. Okay. You have understood the mechanism of warfarin. One important question they can ask is, it also inhibits protein C and protein S. Warfarin. Okay. Along with these factor activations, it also inhibits protein C and protein S. See, protein C is the factor 7 is the fastest to get inhibited. 6 hours, that's all. But factor 2, it takes nearly 60 hours to get activated only. So warfarin will take some time to inhibit this. So delayed effect is seen only. That's why warfarin is used only as maintenance. Heparin is used for acute cases. Warfarin is used only as maintenance. Okay. So the answer for this question is cefepime. Bluish pink rash on forehead is seen with which drug? Straightforward question from GI Goodman Gilman. It is amiodarone. This is called as Smurf skin or blue man syndrome or blue man syndrome. So this amiodarone is a antiarrhythmic of class 3. M for master antiarrhythmic. That is, it has all class property. Calcium block, sodium block, potassium block, beta block. And it also causes myocardial depression. I, iodine. It contains iodine. That's why it can cause hyperthyroidism, also hypothyroidism. Here, O, long-term toxicity, liver and on long-term use, it can cause toxicity, liver and lung fibrosis. D for dronidirone. This dronidirone is another group of drug in amiodarone class. No thyroid adverse events because iodine is not present in that. And D also stands for increased duration of QT because of potassium block. Action potential duration is increased, duration of QT is also increased. So it can cause torsadipoitis. O, optic neuritis. A, treatment of ventricular tachycardia and ventricular fibrillation in acute ischemia setting, acute ischemia, drug of choice. R, rash, blue man syndrome, Smurf skin. It is used in the treatment of refractory arrhythmias of ventricular fibrillation and ventricular tachycardia. N for neuropathy, peripheral neuropathy. E for eye changes, corneal microdeposits. It's also an enzyme inhibitor. It causes photosensitivity of eyes. Do not use amiodarone in digoxin-induced ventricular fibrillation. See how easy I have done. It's the longest acting antiarrhythmic. Amiodarone A, antiarrhythmic class 3. Master M for master antiarrhythmic, all class property, calcium, potassium, sodium and beta block. Since it causes potassium block, it can cause QT prolongation. Since it is causing QT prolongation, it is known to cause torsadipoitis. It cannot be used in digoxin-induced ventricular fibrillation because of potassium block. M also stands for myocardial depression. I, iodine containing. So it can cause hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism. On long-term toxicity, lung and liver fibrosis can happen. Now D for dronidirone, it does not contain iodine, so no thyroid ADRs. The same D we already saw, duration of QT is increased. A, it is used in acute ischemia, ventricular fibrillation, ventricular acute ischemia. Or for refractory arrhythmias, VF and VT. Rash, blue man syndrome, Smurf skin. O, optic neuritis. N, neuropathy, which is peripheral neuropathy. E, eye, corneal deposits, enzyme inhibitor and photosensitivity. So the answer to this is Smurf skin, blue man syndrome, amiodarone. Dexamethasone given to mother for fetal lung maturity in the following dose bar duration. Very simple. Dexamethasone 6 mg you should give 12 hours, 4 doses. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 12 hours apart, given IM. Betamethasone, 12 mg, 2 doses, 24 hours apart. It is not available in India. So only dexamethasone is available in India. So 6 mg, 4 doses, 12 hours apart, IM. It increases fetal lung maturity. That is, accelerates lung maturity. So fetal lung maturity, it increases fetal lung maturity given within 32 weeks of delivery for preterm delivery. Within 32 weeks, if the baby labor patient goes into labor, you can give this. It reduces patent ductal arteriosus, necrotizing enterocolitis, peri-bar intraventricular hemorrhages. Okay. So the question here is dexamethasone given to mother for fetal dose, which dose? So 12 hours for 48 hours, wrong. 6 mg 12 hourly for 24 hours is correct. 6 mg 4 hourly is wrong. 24 mg every 12 hours. No. 12 mg every 24 hours. They have just given the reverse. So this is also wrong. So dexamethasone 6, 6, 6, 6, 12, 12, 12 gap. IM. Okay. One more point about dexamethasone which I want to see, since this is an answer and discussion, they can ask next time this question. Dexamethasone suppression test. So you first start to give dexamethasone 1 mg per oral at 11 p.m. in the night. The next day morning, you measure your plasma cortisol effect in the plasma cortisol. If it is less than 3 micrograms per deciliter, it means that the cortisol is not increased because there is feedback inhibition. So the HPA axis is positive. So it's a normal patient. If the cortisol levels are greater than 5 micrograms per deciliter, it means that the positive inhibition is gone. Feedback inhibition is gone. So HPA axis is not proper. So it can be diagnostic of Cushing syndrome, which can be because of an adrenal tumor or a pituitary tumor. Now to differentiate between this adrenal and pituitary tumor, what you have to do? Again, you have to give dexamethasone at 11 p.m. but higher dose, 8 mg you have to give. Measure the plasma cortisol at next day morning, 8 a.m. Same like what you did for the first time. If there is 50% reduction in cortisol level, it means that it is Cushing disease, pituitary tumor. But if there is less than 50% reduction, it is significance of adrenal tumors. But to differentiate between whether it's an ectopic ACTH production or adrenal tumor producing ACTH, you have to measure ACTH level in the plasma. If it is low, it is adrenal tumor. If it is high, it is an ectopic ATH production. Dexamethasone, give 1 mg at 11 p.m. Next day morning, measure at 8 a.m. cortisol level. If it is less than 3, it is normal. If it is greater than 3, it is Cushing syndrome. To differentiate between adrenal or pituitary tumor, you have to give dexamethasone same day night, 8 mg higher dose. Next day morning, measure plasma cortisol. If there is 50% reduction in the cortisol, it is significance of pituitary tumor, Cushing's disease. If there is less than 50% reduction, now again go for measurement of ACTH, differentiate between ectopic ACTH production and adrenal tumor. If it low ACTH, it is adrenal tumor. If it is high, it is ectopic ACTH. Okay. And this is a very nice question. Area under the curve of a drug A plus B was 819 value. Area of the drug of B alone was 574. It means that B was 574. When A was given with B, it became 819. So it means if area under curve is increasing, it means your bioavailability is increasing. Simple logic. What is the effect of drug A on drug B? So let's see this graph. This is a bioavailability graph. Time, concentration. Cmax is nothing but the maximum concentration. Tmax is the time taken to reach the maximum, the rate of absorption it says. AUC gives your extent of absorption. This is bioavailability. The first increase in the concentration shows that the drug is getting absorbed in. The second decrease in the concentration shows the drug is getting eliminated from the body. So how do you increase this AUC, the center part? If you reduce first pass metabolism, AUC can be increased. If you reduce first pass metabolism, AUC can be increased. So decreased bioavailability means increased first pass metabolism, or reduced first pass metabolism directly proportional to increased bioavailability directly proportional to increased AUC. If elimination is reduced, area under the curve can be increased. Decreased elimination directly proportional to increased bioavailability directly proportional to increased AUC. Increased absorption directly proportional to increased bioavailability directly proportional to increased AUC. So only these three things can happen. Based on this graph, you can interpret only these things. So now let's go to question. Drug A decreases intestinal absorption of metabolism of B. Absorption is decreased, bioavailability should decrease, AU should decrease, but it is increasing. So it's a wrong option. Drug A decreases first pass metabolism. If first pass metabolism is decreased, bioavailability is increased, AUC is increased. So this option is right. Drug A augments the effect of drug B. No, this cannot be told with help of bioavailability curve. It can be only told by dose response curve based on efficacy and potency. So this option is ruled out. This is not suitable for this question. Drug A increases the elimination of drug B. If drug is getting eliminated, it means the AUC, which was like this, if it is getting eliminated, it will become like this. It will decrease. So bioavailability is decreasing, AUC is decreasing. So this is also option is wrong. So the correct option here is drug A decreases the first pass metabolism of drug B. It means the bioavailability is going to get increased. Your area under the curve is also going to get increased. More drug is going to get absorbed. So this graph will become like this. More drug will get absorbed. Okay. If elimination rate constant is 0.05, what is the T half of the drug? It's very easy. T half direct formula. It's all Goodman-Gilman. 0.693 divided by elimination rate constant. So if you divide this by your 0.35 rate constant, the answer you get is 13.86. So the closest option here is 13. So answer D is the option. Now another formula by which T half is 0.963 into VD by clearance, volume of distribution, but they have not given that. They have given elimination rate constant. So remember this formula. There are two formulas for T half. By heart it. Among the following, which is centrally acting opioid antitussive? See, while seeing this option only, I will rule out ambroxol and bromhexidine because they are mucolytics. They are not at all opioids. So this is gone. So I am left with only levorphenol or diphenoxylate. So see, I know diphenoxylate is given along with atropine, is combined with atropine. Okay. For treatment of diarrhea, traveler's diarrhea. Why? Diphenoxylate is an opioid. It is combined with atropine. Why? Atropine will reduce your motility. Okay. What is the action of opioids on gut? Creams. Meiosis, sedation, analgesic, respiratory, depression, C for constipation. So the opioids can stop your diarrhea, opposite. Okay. Atropine can also helpful in that. But one more rationale behind combining atropine with diphenoxylate is to reduce the opioid dependence. Remember this, traveler's diarrhea. So antitussive they are asking. So I am left with only levorphenol. But everybody thinks, sir, levorphenol is an analgesic of choice. It is not an antitussive. So this levorphenol gets metabolized to dextromethorphan, which is an antitussive. So dextromethorphan is a derivative from levorphenol. So very cleverly these people have asked it. So go for the option levorphenol. Okay. A 14-month-old HIV pneumonia is nothing but influenza, H influenza, planning to give ampicillin but shifted to ceftriaxone. What is the mark the incorrect option? Mark the incorrect option. See, earlier ampicillin was a drug of choice for H. influenza, but now ampicillin has become resistant. H. influenza has become resistant to ampicillin. What is the mechanism of resistance? There are two things. One is beta-lactamase, positive. The other one is altered penicillin binding proteins. These altered penicillin binding proteins kind of resistance is called as BLNAR, which is nothing but beta-lactamase negative ampicillin resistant. BLNAR. So two ways, beta-lactamase positive or altered penicillin binding proteins. So the drug of choice for beta-lactamase positive type of resistance is third generation cephalosporins or amoxicillin with clavulanic acid. Among this, the drug of choice will be your ceftriaxone. Still, I'll go for beta-lactamase positive variety means I'll go for amoxicillin with clavulanic acid. For BLNAR, I'll go with ceftriaxone. Okay. So that's a drug of choice. So now let's come to the options. Cotrimazole is a drug of choice, but patient allergic to sulfa drugs. That's why we didn't change to ampicillin to ceftriaxone we use. Cotrimazole is a drug of choice for pneumocystis jirovecii pneumonia, not for HIV pneumonia, influenza pneumonia. So this is wrong. HIV Haemophilus influenza produces protein binding hence resistance to penicillins. Modifies protein binding. Correct. Ceftriaxone better IV drug than ampicillin. Correct. HIV produces beta-lactamase and resistance. Correct. So the only option we are left is incorrect option. Cotrimazole is a drug of choice, but patient allergic to sulfa drugs. So that is the option. Very simple question. Novel antidepressant among the given following drugs: lurasidone and asinapine. Both are antipsychotics. Both are atypical antipsychotics used in treatment of schizophrenia. So the question is an antidepressant. So rule out. Now we are only left with vilazodone and buspirone. Vilazodone is used for major depression, MDD. It's called major depressive disorder. It's a SPARI. It's called SPARI because it's serotonin reuptake inhibitor. It increases serotonin levels. It also acts as a partial agonist at 5-HT1A. See, this 5-HT1A is a heteroreceptor. Okay. So this can also help in increasing your serotonin. So this is called SPARI, serotonin reuptake inhibitor, 5-HT1A partial agonist. When compared with SSRIs and SNRIs, these are all atypical. This is all typical. Atypical, vilazodone is atypical. It can reduce your emotional blunting. Remember, they might ask you this in exams. Emotional blunting is reduced. One of the main side effects noted with this is suicidal thoughts, GI effects. Other than that, you have insomnia, serotonin syndrome, bleeding, pancreatitis, SADH. Main thing is suicidal thoughts. Best absorbed with food, that is with a fatty meal. So this is about vilazodone. This is a newer, novel antidepressant. Now we wanted to see other options also. Asinapine. It's an atypical antipsychotic given by oral as well as sublingual route. Schizophrenia treatment. This is nothing but it is produced by altering myosin structure. Myosin is an antidepressant, but the structure has been chemically altered to produce asinapine. Okay. This has 5-HT1A partial agonistic action at serotonin 1A receptor, rest all serotonin receptor antagonist. Alpha antagonist, D antagonist, H1 antagonist. Remember this. Okay. It can cause QT prolongation. Very important. It can cause QT prolongation. It can cause weight gain. Increase in appetite. Increase in glucose also it can cause hyperglycemia. This is about asinapine. Lurasidone is another atypical antipsychotic given in schizophrenia. It can also be used for bipolar disorder combined with lithium. Same thing what we saw for asinapine. But not antagonist at all the receptor, only at 5-HT2A, other receptors we don't know. But 5-HT1A partial agonist, dopamine antagonist, alpha antagonist. CYP3A4 metabolism, long acting, 18 hours. Angioedema is noted. Angioedema side effect. Movement disorders, tardive dyskinesia and EPS. Okay. What is the other choice we have? Buspirone. Buspirone is nothing but a antidepressant. 5-HT1A partial agonistic action, no sedation, no abuse, no muscle relaxant activities, no anticonvulsant property. Longer time to act. So it is not used in acute anxiety. It is mainly used for anxiety. It is, even though it is a partial and agonist action, it is not used for depression. It is used for generalized anxiety disorders, mild to moderate generalized anxiety disorders. It's ineffective in panic attacks because panic attacks faster action because it takes 2 weeks to act. Isapirone, gipirone, buspirone. So simple way to differentiate this question is these two are antipsychotics. These two is used in anti-anxiety. So vilazodone is the new drug that is used for antidepressants. Coming to newer drugs for antidepressants. Esketamine spray, nasal spray. It is used in resistant depression and also as a general anesthetic. And also for major depression with suicidal ideation, esketamine spray. It's an NMDA antagonist similar to ketamine. Can be used as general anesthetic in shock patients. Visual disturbance, dizziness, numbness is one of the side effects. It's an NMDA antagonist, esketamine spray. Brexanolone, postpartum depression it is used. Brexanolone is used for postpartum depression. It's nothing but a steroid, neurosteroid derived from progesterone. It has to be given by 60-hour continuous infusion. It's a GABA A modulator. It can cause sedation. Okay. And even dry mouth. 60-hour continuous infusion, brexanolone, postpartum depression, neurosteroid. Last one is vortioxetine. It is also used for major depression. So serotonin reuptake, norepinephrine reuptake, it blocks. Okay, so 5-HT1A agonist, 5-HT3 antagonistic action. Headache, constipation, and sexual dysfunction can happen. Because serotonin reuptake inhibitors show sexual dysfunction. Similarly, it can also. Remember this vortioxetine is similar to vilazodone. Same serotonin reuptake inhibitor, 5-HT1A partial agonist. Same 5-HT1 inhibitor, 5-HT1A agonist and serotonin blocker, reuptake inhibitors. Now, coming to remdesivir, mechanism of action. Very easy. It's an RNA-dependent DNA polymerase inhibitor. Rest of the options don't even think about it. Wrong. Straightforward question. Inhibition of RNA-dependent DNA polymerase. So it's a broad spectrum antiviral drug given IV. It's a pro-drug. It's called a protide because it's a pro-drug of nucleotide. Remember, they might ask, it's called a protide. It's a pro-drug of nucleotide. It is getting converted to G641-524 monophosphate. This is the metabolite. This gets phosphorylated, triphosphorylated to form triphosphate form of the drug, which is the active form. Same like isoclovir. Monophosphate is getting phosphorylated to form diphosphate and again getting phosphorylated to form triphosphate. So this is the major metabolite, GS441-524. This help how it acts by inhibiting RNA-dependent DNA polymerase. So proofreading activity is gone. Proofreading awaits viral proofreading by viral exonucleases. T-half is just 20 minutes. That's why I give an IV for having maximum bioavailability. Decreases viral production, respiratory failure and jaundice. Main thing is jaundice. Decrease in platelets. Some ECG abnormalities. Obviously, infusion reactions can be noted. This is about remdesivir. Anti-epileptic used in the treatment of neuropathic pain. Very easy. Lamotrigine, valproate is not used, phenytoin is not used, lamotrigine is not used. Only carbamazepine is used. So what are all the other drugs that can be used? Carbamazepine, pregabalin and gabapentin. Carbamazepine is a drug of choice for trigeminal neuralgia and also partial seizures. Trigeminal neuralgia. It can also be used for herpetic neuralgia. But the drug of choice for both diabetic and herpetic neuralgia is pregabalin or gabapentin. It is also used for multiple sclerosis pain. Carbamazepine, neuropathy, trigeminal. Pregabalin, gabapentin, neuralgia, diabetic, herpetic, also for MS. So answer is carbamazepine. A seizure patient was given phenytoin and also was prescribed sucralfate. What timing is simple? First give phenytoin, wait for 120 minutes, and then give sucralfate. Straight question from Goodman, straight line from Goodman-Gilman. All JIPMER people have taken these questions this time for INISET. They only take these kind of straight questions. So the option is 120 minutes. So let's see a little bit about sucralfate. Sucralfate and colloidal bismuth subcitrate both are ulcer protecting agents. So what does this do? When there is an ulcer at an acidic pH of 4, the sucralfate goes and polymerizes to form a viscous layer and it covers your ulcer. Over the base of the ulcer, it covers so that substances cannot come and sit on the ulcer. It doesn't get irritated again. It's nothing but aluminum salt of sulfated sucrose. This sucralfate can gain phosphates, so it can cause hypophosphatemia as one of the side effects. Do not give with antacids because antacids will increase your pH, but this requires 4 or below pH to act. So don't give it with antacids. Major side effect is constipation with sucralfate. With bismuth, bismuth toxicity can occur, blackening of tongue, osteodystrophy and encephalopathy. That's called bismuth toxicity. Bismuth is also used in quadruple regimen of H. pylori. It helps in killing H. pylori. There are two more drugs in this group, rebapamide and isabet. New drugs. Rebapamide and isabet. They both are increasing prostaglandin synthesis. So they are nothing but cytoprotective drugs. They are called cytoprotective drugs. Increases the reactive oxygen species. Increases reactive oxygen species. Reduces the reactive oxygen species. So oxidative stress is reduced. At the same time, prostaglandin synthesis is also increased. Cytoprotective drugs. So the answer here is 120 minutes. Because if you give it immediately, it can reduce phenytoin absorption. Among the following drug is contraindicated in patient with angle closure glaucoma. Okay. Easy. Let's see. Mirtazapine. So what is mirtazapine? See, first we'll see sertraline and fluoxamine. Both are SSRIs. Both are SSRIs. They don't have anticholinergic property. They don't have anticholinergic property. Because you should see, in eye which receptor is present? Mainly the M3 receptors are present. No anticholinergic property for SSRI, so it's ruled out. Mirtazapine is an atypical antidepressant. It acts only in your 5-HT receptors, not at all in your anticholinergic receptors. So amitriptyline is the one that acts in alpha, histamine, as well as muscarinic receptors. So this will, what will happen? Blocking activity. So it will block the M3 receptors. So mydriasis will happen. If mydriasis happens, what will happen? Canal of Schlein angle will close. So drainage of aqueous will reduce. So it is contraindicated in angle closure glaucoma. Amitriptyline is the answer. Now we'll see about amitriptyline. See, amitriptyline blocks 5-HT1A bar alpha 2 presynaptically. So amitriptyline blocks your 5-HT1A bar alpha 2. So it increases your serotonin levels. Presynaptic. What other things amitriptyline blocks? It blocks your alpha, histamine, as well as your muscarinic receptors. So that is responsible for anticholinergic side effects. Alpha responsible for postural hypotension. Histamine block, muscarinic block will responsible for your blurred vision also. That's why you don't give it a sedation. Histamine block is sedation. Muscarinic block, blurred vision, constipation, dry mouth, urinary retention. So antidepressant, tricyclic antidepressants have lot of side effects. Okay. One of other group of this TCS is imipramine, where you use it for nocturnal enuresis, but drug of choice is desmopressin. Nocturnal enuresis, but drug of choice is desmopressin. depressive. The role of C, why I am telling this 5-HT1A alpha 2. See the role, these are autoreceptors. These are autoreceptors for heteroreceptors. Okay. So activation of these receptors will reduce your serotonin. So if you block these receptors, it will increase your serotonin presynaptically. Understand? That's all. This also reduces your noradrenaline uptake. So noradrenaline is also increased. SSRIs only 5-HT1. No noradrenaline, no anticholinergic, no alpha block. First choice of drug in BPOD, brain pod. Remember this, brain pod, depression, mania, PMTS, post-menstrual stress disorder, panic disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder. P. O for obsessive compulsive disorder. D for depression. B for bulimia. So first choice of drug. Nausea and diarrhea more commonest. It reduces ejaculation. Insomnia and agitation can happen. Agitation is also very common. Okay. Do not give with MAO inhibitors. It can cause serotonin syndrome. It can also reduce platelet levels, whereas sertraline and citalopram are safe with warfarin. It doesn't cause abnormal bleeding. So among this, fluoxetine is longest acting. Fluoxamine is shortest acting. Remember it. Fluoxetine longest acting. Fluoxamine is shortest acting. Paroxetine is teratogenic. Sertraline and citalopram can be used with warfarin because tendency to bleeding is very less. Other drugs can increase bleeding. Citalopram is more specific SSRI. Coming to mirtazapine, we saw in options, and mianserin, two things same. Inhibits presynaptic alpha 2 receptors. Inhibits presynaptic alpha 2 receptors. So reduces noradrenaline, 5-HT release. So more is available in the synaptic cleft. 5-HT2, 5-HT3 antagonist activity. So it also have selective activation of 5-HT1 also. Not only inhibits your alpha 2 presynaptically, but it also has effect on 5-HT1 activation. So this is called noradrenergic specific serotonergic antidepressants. It can cause weight gain as one of the problems. This mianserin causes seizures. That's why mirtazapine is more preferred. All these are atypical. All these are atypical. Okay. Coming to other groups, SNRIs. Venlafaxine, dexvenlafaxine, duloxetine, milnacipran, levomilnacipran. Faster acting venlafaxine will reduce the interactions. SSRI plus noradrenaline reuptake block. Whereas SSRI does not have any role on noradrenaline, only with 5-HT. This has increased noradrenaline. So that's why it's serotonin noradrenaline reuptake inhibitor. Duloxetine longest acting. Milnacipran and duloxetine together are used for fibromyalgia. Duloxetine is also used in neuropathic pain. This is the drug of choice for severe depression. When compared to SSRI, SSRI is the drug of choice for depression, but severe depression you can prefer SNRIs. Other drug which we have never seen is trazodone and nefazodone. Trazodone and nefazodone. They causes alpha block along with 5-HT2 block. Sedation and priapism is more common with trazodone. Nefazodone is hepatotoxic. Remember it. Okay. So the answer for this question is contraindicated in patient is amitriptyline because all receptors are blocked. Muscarinic block, mydriasis, canal of angle of screen closure reduced. So angle closure, of course, is not drained, it's precipitate. So amitriptyline we saw, these are all TCAs. We saw SSRIs, which has only 5-HT2, no noradrenaline, no anticholinergic, alpha block, drug of choice for first choice, DPOD. Mirtazapine and mianserin are atypical. They inhibit presynaptic alpha 2 receptors. SNRI is SSRI plus noradrenergic activity, reuptake block. 5-HT2 block, trazodone and nafazone, other atypical antidepressants. Okay. So we have seen around 18 questions we have discussed. I think it is one of the fantastic discussions. In detail, we have discussed not only the questions, but also the other possible questions that can be asked with a detailed explanation. With some new drugs also I have told. So please, before NEET, have this video, revise it once. Out of these 18 questions with the discussion which I made, 50 slides I have made. If you read these 50 slides, at least 5 questions you can answer. There will be a possibility that 5 questions can be asked out of this. At least 5 concepts-based questions you can answer. Okay. So that's it for discussion. Thank you.